It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the Heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Well, joining us on the podcast by George live line is our old buddy, our old pal, Brian McLean. He's chair of the Iowa Democratic Party's Progressive Caucus. I don't get to talk enough to fellow progressives on the show, really, and we've had a lot of coverage here lately about the D.C. riot and its aftermath, but we're going to get a perspective from Brian, and particularly I want to talk about this really well-written, articulate, and insightful statement that came from Brian and the Progressive Caucus right after that went down in D.C., and I'll start off reading this, and we'll get into it here in a couple of paragraphs. And before I get going, Brian, welcome back to a podcast by George.
Happy to be here, George. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we're delighted to have you back on. Okay, so here's what you wrote. A true participatory democracy must always uphold the right to protest and support the direct actions that endeavor to build a better world, a better future, and defend the rights of the disenfranchised and exploited. However, those actions must always be done in good faith with acknowledgement that our Constitution and branches of government are the foundational structures of our country. It is through their function where the redress of grievances are executed. Without that, there is no rule of law. The actions of those who invaded the halls of Congress and interrupted a legislative session on the behalf of a corrupt demagogue and his cronies in no way uphold the values of our representative democracy or share the honor, the values, or justification of those brave activists who have taken to the streets against true tyranny and injustice. Okay, before I want to read on, Brian, I wanted to get to this point, which I brought up immediately on my podcast, because this is how it really struck me. When I looked at that, I thought, my God, after all of the injustice and all of the literal murders, lynchings, rapes, and all of the insults and racism levied against the minority populations of the United States since this country's inception, the people that had to take it upon themselves to crawl through the windows of the state capitol, for God's sake, armed, are these overfed, internet-crazed, I don't know how you want to describe, QAnon nuts. To me, I just thought that was shocking. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Those people. Did it strike you that way? Did you have that reaction as well?
I think that I agree with the sentiment that this was something that was in the making for a long time, and we just needed to see when it would actually happen. It's not an overestimation to point out that these weren't just yokels or people living in their parents' basement. These are business owners. These are professionals. These are people that got sucked into whatever conspiracy was out there, and they ran with it for whatever reason. Mostly, I believe, because the foundations of this country have created so much despair. They're just looking for something to hang on to at this point. Well, that's not to excuse their behavior and their actions in any way. And just really quick, this does not in any way, that we have a lot of whataboutisms, BLM, Antifa. This is nowhere near the same thing. Nowhere near. People didn't die during those protests. Some of them got pretty hairy, and quite frankly, it was still, in my opinion, very reserved, and because this is against the injustice of being killed in the streets. Yes. How can you measure that up against a bunch of people that are sad that their preferred presidential pick didn't win the election and can't absorb that?
Didn't get their way. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree 100%. I just thought it was a huge insult to injury that out of all the people, all the grievances and all the segments of our population that are deserving of redress, the people that crawled through the windows with guns are these folks. But let me continue here. They're willing to destroy the very fabric of our country and subvert democracy itself in order to enact a coup to install a dictator, not a president, lawfully elected by the people. You said that the events are also the result of months of propagandizing the idea that our elections are rigged, that their fellow Americans of differing viewpoints are the enemy, and that the very institutions of the government conspire to destroy the United States itself. Okay, I wanted to stop there because another reaction that I had that I voiced on the podcast, and I wanted to get your read on this because I know you, like I was, particularly in 2016, a big Bernie supporter. I think it's pretty well known that Bernie, the primary, was rigged against him, rigged to use that term in 2016 and in 2020. I just had an entire episode devoted to the Democratic National Party and the Iowa Party and that shadow app and the results being muddied in the Iowa caucus and how Bernie kind of got off to a flying stop because of that. So I don't know, Brian, where did you consider that as far as this allegation of rigging is concerned by Trump and his followers after folks like me, anyway, thought there was some rigging against Bernie Sanders?
Two different foundations handle those particular between primary and general. And in my opinion, the election of Donald Trump in 2016 is proof positive evidence that it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to rig a general election. I honestly went into the general election 2016 thinking there's no way either of these parties are going to let Donald Trump take over. So, and he won. He won overwhelmingly. Call it what it is, but I think that Trump's very existence as president of the United States over the past 4 years is more than enough evidence that you can't really rig a general election like you could have access to a primary or a caucus.
No, I agree with you, and you're able to discern the difference. I just wonder whether or not some of those people in Washington, D.C. Had that same ability of discernment. I'm not exactly sure, but you write that this is no way absolving the actions of domestic terrorists, but it's important that we cast our eyes upon those who use their elected position and the pulpit it provides to add fuel to the blaze. We must hold accountable those who brought dishonor and shame to the public offices they hold representing the state of Iowa. And this is the real gist of this thing. And I want to read these names off. And first and foremost, and my God, I hope we can stop talking about this guy sometime soon. Former Representative Steve King at the top of the list. Representative Randy Feenstra, the new guy. Representative Ashley Hinson. Senator Joni Ernst. Senator Chuck Grassley. Governor Kim Reynolds. And, of course, right at the very top, President Donald J. Trump. So those are the people that you're holding responsible. And you want to, now, when you made this initial claim, you were talking for those people. There's a methodology here that actually can impeach the president. We're doing that. It's moved through the House, going to go to the Senate for a vote. But there's this 14, Article 13, or 3, whatever it is in the House that could actually affect these people. Can you explain that?
If they are investigated properly, and if it is found that they helped to instigate either directly or indirectly this particular situation under the Constitution, Article 14, Section 3, they cannot hold public office. That was put in after the Civil War as a way of ensuring that Confederate people in power couldn't just come into Congress and mess with things. It was kind of a safeguard, and it makes sense. We have people that want to overthrow the entire system through violent and what's the word I'm looking for? Through violent or illegitimate means. They shouldn't be sitting in a place where they can help that happen. I named off all of them. I actually had one person comment on why didn't you add Miller Meeks to it? And that is simply because I could not find any direct evidence that she participated in the same big lie that all these other individuals enabled and pushed and eventually led to this violent attempted coup. And I know some people are kind of mixed up whether or not to call this an insurrection, a coup. It wasn't organized by any means, but the more we find out that there was an element of organization, and it's becoming extremely frightening to find that out. But yeah, that's kind of where we were at. We called all those people out. We thought it was necessary that the people that pushed this whole thing, that made the environment for this whole insurrection, this attempted coup to happen, should be held accountable for their actions and removed from office through whatever legitimate means necessary.
Let's talk a little broader picture here now, Brian. There's a lot of discord is the understatement of the year, maybe, in the country with people that they've got a real plight. I don't know about those people that crawled through the windows, but out around the country, I mean, people have lost their health care because of this pandemic. They've lost their jobs. We're not seeing any move for Medicare for all. There was that force the vote effort, which I thought was very good, that didn't even manage to get a floor vote in the House of Representatives. I look at Donald Trump as an example, and I blame all of these Republicans just like you do, and him right at the top of the list, obviously. 90% of the blame goes there. But I'm also looking at the Democrats and saying, you guys are funding the military. $740 billion just approved in the latest NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act. The entire Iowa delegation votes in favor of that, Democrat and Republicans alike. They also voted together with Steve King, who you had on this list, to prevent an early withdrawal from Afghanistan. Well, Donald Trump, he promised these people that are crawling through the windows, he lied to them, Brian, but he promised that he was going to get us out of those foreign wars. He told us that he was going to get us a better health care system that would cover them, that he would get them the jobs that they need while they watch their neighbors and friends get rich and they continue to get pushed down. None of those things have been forthcoming from the Democratic rank and file. Now, progressives are pushing for that, but it's been a bad year for progressives, Brian. I mean, we're not on much of a run here. We're not doing real well. How much of the corporatist Democratic wing bears responsibility for this as well, or do you completely absolve them?
I don't necessarily absolve them, but I don't think that they are directly responsible for these particular situations. But it was because of the environment that was created through 40 years of neoliberal policies that led to this point, on top of the 90s when we had Newt Gingrich, that really started amping up this sort of rhetoric. And it just all played all together. A lot of things are coming to a head. It's not just the Republicans, definitely. The Democrats have also not done enough to listen to and to fix the plight of the poor and the working class. I would disagree with you that progressives have become weaker, though. I think we have become more ingrained. I think we have become a little bit more astute in how we are proceeding with things. I would also like to acknowledge that we have 3 members of the squad, and honestly, I would also include Porter in the squad as well. I don't know why nobody does. They're currently in the House Oversight Committee. I'm going to look forward to watching some of those sessions. And we also now have at the head of the Senate Budget Committee a certain Vermont senator who we seem to like very much. And he's already making waves and kind of nudging Biden a little bit. Now, I like to tell people I voted against Trump, but I voted for Biden's dogs. I don't really have a great deal of hope that without some significant pushing from the left, that Biden's going to do a great deal beyond hitting the reset button. He's also shown that he kind of is vulnerable to that sort of pushing, and then he kind of snaps back real quick and like, nope, no, I didn't mean that. We see that with like student loans. We see that with the survivor check, with the survival checks. I think he can actually be moved one direction or another. Now that's yet to be seen. I think that I understand the force the vote. I personally did not. I understood the position that the progressives were put in that particular situation. I'm pretty sure some deals were made, and that's why we see members of the squad that are now on very powerful committees. Um, and that's a good thing, in my opinion. I think this is the long game. That being said, all that rambling being said, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right, Brian.
Uh, I was talking with somebody earlier today, and I think that Trump's political capital is done. Mitch McConnell's already thrown down the gauntlet, said, you know what, era Trump is over. I'm taking back over. I'm taking the Republican Party back over. That doesn't mean in 4 years we won't have a Hawley or somebody else that will tap into that exact same rage. Um, and that concerns me because anybody else that's whose name's being floated around, except for maybe Ted Cruz, is way more intelligent and more able to use the political capital that they have in a more efficient manner than Trump ever did. That's very dangerous. That's very dangerous to be able to take control of what Trump started and use it in an efficient manner. So we need Biden to be FDR on steroids. We need an immediate shift to the left. And I think that we have the proper people in place in order to make that happen, in order to avoid a potential showdown again in 2024 with a potential fascist dictator.
To avoid a Trump 2.0. That's what a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are calling it. I think you're exactly right. And it's unfortunate that we're in this situation with Biden because he's shown no evidence of this previously. And people don't like his age. I actually think it might be a benefit here. I don't know for whatever reason, but kind of surly, tough, old, disagreeable guys, when they get old for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason, I mean, we've all seen this. They kind of get weepy and they kind of get soft and they kind of
Mm-hmm.
get more empathetic, for lack of a better term. Let's hope that Joe Biden does that, because I look at two key areas. I mean, and this DC riot really brought it out to me. My God, a lot of that was not a lot, but some of those people were disenfranchised military people that
Yeah.
were involved in that thing. They're coming back from these foreign wars and they're ruined, and they're
Mm-hmm.
going in for the best of reasons sometimes, but they're not coming out that way. And again, that's another reason to stop these wars. Joe Biden, on an executive action basis, can do that, like you said, on
Mm-hmm.
day one. He can put a stop to some of those foreign wars. That needs to be done immediately. And then, kind of my litmus test for the rest of the Democratic Party in particular is this Medicare for All thing. I mean, we really need to
Mm-hmm.
get that done. Nancy Pelosi, for God's sake, ran on that in 1994, if you can believe that. All
Yeah.
of the squad that you mentioned, they all campaigned on that. They
Mm-hmm.
all get reelected on that. And 3 out of 10 Americans right now lost their health care this year because 20% of them are unemployed in a pandemic. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell people all the time, dogs have health care in this country. They've got health care plans for dogs, for God's sake.
Yeah.
For cats. I mean, why wouldn't we give Medicare for all to our fellow Americans in a pandemic? So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of my rant within a rant. That has to be done. And these progressives in Congress that campaigned on this, the force the vote was their opportunity to step up and hold Nancy Pelosi's feet to the fire. They didn't do it. So they better get it done now for that reason, if nothing else. I mean, they got elected on that basis and their constituents reelected
Mm-hmm.
them because they believed that they would do something for Medicare for all, and they need to do it now. If not now, Brian, when, for God's sake? This is
Mm-hmm.
the absolute perfect time for Medicare for all. And again, it goes back to Bernie Sanders, the guy that you supported.
Mm-hmm. It's I'm watching, and I know that both of us probably don't like the whole five-dimensional chess thing, but we are gaining a lot of ground. Well, I've told my caucus several times, we have won the ideological battle when it comes to the Democratic Party. We have the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. That is evident in every poll. That is evident in how we're growing in stuff that used to be considered fringe is now mainstream. And like you said, Medicare for all is something that should be something that is put forward immediately. And I think we're getting into a situation now where there's going to be more pushing back against this particular locomotive. we just we I think that it is in the cards. I think that it's going to happen soon. I think that there was a fear that if we ended up forcing it or putting it forward, that there would be consequences that would lead to not being in a good position in order to bring this stuff up again in the future. And even now, Senator Sanders, one of the first things that he's pushing in his in a plan for relieving people's suffering from this whole coronavirus, the coronavirus relief package, is the absolving of essentially putting forward at least a temporary Medicare for all during the course of the pandemic. He's sliding that into that package to see if he can get it in. I really think that this is a situation. If we actually get something like that in and people get a taste of it, they're not going to want to go back to the way it used to be. That's kind of what I'm hoping. I know that it was a disappointment to some folks, and I know that a lot of people, even in my caucus, would disagree with me that the force the vote thing. I understood it. I didn't jump on that bandwagon myself. Not insulting that movement at all, by the way, by using the term bandwagon. But I still have faith in the people that were put into office, those working class people that were put into office, starting with AOC and Ilhan Omar and Representative Tlaib. Sorry.
Yeah.
I still have faith that they're going to end up pushing this forward. We also have a very interesting situation now in the Senate, where the Democrats now have control of the Senate. It's no longer Mitch McConnell. You can't just point the finger at him and say it's all his fault, and a lot of it is. They have the opportunity to step up, and we got to make sure to remind them every step of the way, hey, you guys have control. You have the trifecta. Well, maybe not Supreme Court, but you have the Senate, you have the House of Representatives, you have the presidency. Let's do something with that.
And the question is, if not, why not? I mean, you said you're going to be looking at it with interest. Me too, with the supermajority. Let's get some of these things done. And if they're not getting done, man, there's little room for excuse now. And I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and having any criticism of the Democratic Party, because, folks, Brian McLean is the chair of the Iowa Democratic Party's Progressive Caucus. He's got to work within the party. And every time I talk to him, I flash back to the first caucus that I went to with Bernie Sanders back in 16 or 15. I remember the Democrats were mad as hell, Brian, about Bernie even running. I mean, I had people come up and hiss at me. He's not even a Democrat. And I'd look at him, well, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, he's not, he doesn't have the secret code, or he doesn't have a decoder ring, or what? He doesn't contribute. What is it that makes him a Democrat or not a Democrat? Well, that was back in 2015, 2016. And here we are today. And I'll say this in closing, just my little bit here before I give you a last word. Brian, like I said, these litmus tests for me are the issues, the wars, obviously. Climate is a big overriding one. But then again, Medicare for all. And then for timing, my litmus test that I look at, my lifetime. I know you've got to work within the party. These things have got to happen. I put on my podcast that they've been talking about Medicare for all since FDR. JFK was a big supporter of it. Truman was a supporter of it. I mentioned Pelosi even campaigned on it in 94. So I would like to see this stuff get done in my lifetime. And folks, Brian's a busy man. He's got more balls in the air than anybody can catch. So we got to let him go. And I'm going to give you a last word here as we wrap up on the PBG today, Brian.
Well, thank you very much, George. We are preparing to elect officers to the Democratic Party, the Iowa Democratic Party. I have been speaking with activists and progressives and leftists, both inside and outside the party, as to their preference, what they think, who they think that would serve best the progressive agenda. The way that I have I am a part of the Iowa Democratic Party, but as far as I'm concerned, I am a representative of all progressive leftists in this state. So I take very seriously my role. And again, I started this whole journey with Senator Bernie Sanders back in 2015. I very much adopted a not me, us situation. This is definitely not just me. It's going to take all of us standing up together in order to get the things changed that we need to get changed, to make sure we don't nominate another Fred Hubble to go up against Kim Reynolds. You know, and you can trust me that I will do whatever I can to make the best decision for the progressive movement within this party, those who I represent. And I'll fight like hell for it. I have no. There are definitely some people in that party that do not like me and have made that quite apparent, and I'm okay with that. I'm not here to represent them. So,
that's great. That's great, Brian. That's well said. Folks, that's our guy. That's Brian McLean. He's chair of the Iowa Democratic Party's Progressive Caucus. And Brian, thanks again for coming on a podcast by George.
Thank you, George.
We're out of time. We'll get him back, folks. We love having Brian on the show. And if you like Podcast by George, please go to podcastbygeorge.com and subscribe there. Pick an icon, a badge, anywhere you'd like to hear the podcast and see them on YouTube or Facebook. You'll be able to do that. But that's going to wrap it up today. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.